Hello and welcome to Suffolk Business Life. With me today is Andrew Diver of Beatons Accountants.
Good to meet you, and thank you for inviting me.
Andrew, role-wise, your title is Head of Taxation at Beatons. How does that fit in? What's your remit there?
Well, Beatons, we are accountants who cover largely the Suffolk area, but also there are some national businesses who we advise. But my role as Head of Taxation is largely to deal with the income tax, the capital gains tax, VAT, and the whole wide remit of taxes that clients as individuals and businesses face every day, and to try and make sure that they're getting it right with the inland revenue, and also where possible they're able to make savings in doing things the right way and structuring things in the right way that mean that their business is functioning as efficiently as possible.
How long have you been with Beatons?
It's about 2 years now.
Okay, yeah.
Prior to that, I worked for some of the larger accountancy firms in the country, not just in Cambridge, but also up north in sunny Leeds.
Sunny Leeds. What do you find? The whole aim of this show is about the local economy and stuff like that. In your capacity at Cambridge, Leeds and here, do you find the same questions pop up with clients and the same issues, or is there a geographic difference?
Very largely, there's the same sort of questions that people are facing and the same sort of issues. There are slight variations. Certainly, if you were to look at Cambridge, it's a technology centre. There's a lot of resource from the university being ploughed into the local economy, and that generates, and that's a big part of where people need to link up with. Up in Leeds, it's not really the same sort of environment. You have a lot of construction work, you have a lot of more your traditional manufacturing and industrial sectors. So it's really the types of businesses that you will find in the different areas. And obviously locally now, if you look around Suffolk, there's a thriving agricultural centre, and also we have a lot of business to do with the port and the freight industry, which obviously at Beatons a lot of our clients deal with, being based in Felixstowe.
Would you say that's a sort of specialism for Beatons as a rule, or is it where the lion's share of your business lies?
It would be where the lion's share of our business lies. We do have a broad sort of a portfolio of clients in different sectors, but I would say probably about 50% of our business comes from port and port-related activities, and there are specialist areas within that it is necessary to be with an accountant who knows those sort of areas. It's international VAT issues, it's the employees who invariably have come from overseas and come to the UK and have all
tax issues and stuff.
Absolutely. So there's a wide range of sort of niche areas that the port and port-related activities require you to be able to deal with.
Pretty well documented, the economy's had its ups and downs over the last years. Are there any kind of new, sort of business owners seeing this at home, are there any kind of new questions starting to come up? For argument's sake, like Cambridge, there's I should imagine, a lot of R&D there. There's a lot of IT businesses, technology businesses. They will be trying to use new research and development funding that's available. Are you kind of seeing any new things come to light, particularly locally within Suffolk?
I think people are looking. You talk about research and development. That equally applies locally, not just in Cambridge but Suffolk, because the scope of research and development credits actually is beyond what you might ordinarily believe the credits apply to. We've got creative industries who have those sort of things for some of the website capabilities that they do, and you can get 200% tax relief on those expenses. So there are things like that. But I think one of the most important areas that people are asking about is finance. You hear about the banks not lending and difficulties. And it's the bank of mum and dad and friends and family who are helping small businesses nowadays. And how can you help those people who are putting their money at risk? And there are a number of schemes, enterprise investment scheme, and now something called a seedling enterprise investment scheme, that will give them tax relief on the monies that they put into people's businesses.
Would the seedling one, sort of oversimplifying it, would it be kind of for very small ventures that are looking to start? Is that what it's set up for, or?
This has been introduced from April, and it is for very small businesses. Well, when I say very small, they're talking about £100,000 is the size of the business. So it's still a considerable size when you're starting up. But what it will do is enable those people who put money into that venture to get 50% of it back from the tax man.
Okay. Right.
So effectively, if they put £10,000 in from the bank of mum and dad into it, the Inland Revenue give them £5,000 back, and they are only putting that £5,000 at risk for it. So it's a great help. There's a few hurdles and hoops you have to jump through, as always, with the Inland Revenue and forms to fill in. But essentially, it's only for small businesses, and it's only for those that have started in the last 2 years. So they are looking to try and help those small businesses, because if you read all the press, they think that's the area that will generate the recovery more than the larger businesses. The
government's PR machine is relentless about how it's small business and enterprise and stuff like that that's going to dig the economy out of the hole it's found itself in. I mean, in terms of, is that what you're seeing? You know, in your professional capacity, are you seeing that mostly it's the small businesses that are
I would say
where the growth is?
It is actually very difficult to identify where the growth is. It's more industry based, and it depends on what industry you're in. I think some of the historic, you know, I talk about shipping because that's become relatively static, but the big players are still doing relatively well. The small businesses still doing all right, not too bad. Exports are better than imports at the moment. It's doing all right. That's for the business community as a whole, and the country. That's a good thing.
Exports are what the government, it's what the government wants us to do well in, rather than keep relying on.
And that's where the money is, and it is working that way. But you only have to look on your high street to see the retail sector. You know, they are struggling, and small businesses are struggling. Certain industries are doing well, certain industries aren't. Small business, we see a lot more of them starting because people are being made redundant, being given a lump sum, and they take that lump sum with their knowledge that they have, and know that they can do something better if they had that control and that ability to determine their own futures, as it were. So they are seeing this more entrepreneurial spirit coming through with people. So the bigger organisations are cutting down a little bit, and you are seeing this growth from the smaller businesses, the micro businesses. So we advise a lot of those actually at the moment.
Have you or Beatons had much sort of approach on the sort of social enterprise sort of side? You know, we keep hearing about this. I keep up to date current affairs in the media, and it's non-stop. You know, it's a group of people want to start a library, and there's some divestment fund for that, and or privatisation, depending on what way you want to call it. But you see all this stuff going on. Are you seeing any of this sort of starting to reach, Ipswich, Felixstowe?
We've helped out on a number of cases thus far in extraction of businesses out of Suffolk Council.
Okay.
And those were essentially going to be run not for profit basis, essentially just to maintain the service and to ensure that it continues. Equally, we've assisted on various sort of community arrangements, such as public houses where they have ceased to be effectively run by the larger breweries, being purchased by a group of the local folk of the area who want to maintain it as a centre and a hub for the local community, because they serve as more than just a business. It's a place for the people of the village to come together. So those have been also set up, and government funding assisted in terms of tax reliefs to get them up and running. And there's a couple of those in the region at the moment.
I have to say, I run a couple of businesses locally. As you know, my take on what I'm seeing locally is it seems to be on the up. I'm sure it's not for all, and that's, you're always slightly at risk of sweeping generalisation statements and stuff like that. But people that I've been talking to recently seem to be able to find that order books are filling up. There's sales processes themselves are starting to contract, and money seems to be changing hands that little bit quicker than perhaps it was doing 12 months ago.
I think certainly 12 months ago, confidence was very low, and there were a lot of concerns about the future economy and where it was going. I think obviously this region is slightly different from some of the others. You talked about geographical differences earlier on. Certainly the northern cities, you've got a lot more public sector workers who are now unemployed and therefore struggling to actually stimulate the economy up there. But down here, not so much so. So I think we're certainly seeing 12 months on, the businesses are doing better. There's still a little bit of a lack of certainty going forward, but I think we're certainly 12 months better off. And there are some, if you were to talk about green sheets, there are most definitely green sheets. I think people can see how to map their way in the future. I think the lack of bank finance is still, heavily hanging over expansion plans and plans to move forward and essentially consumer spending. As I said, the high street, if the high street isn't spending, then there's question marks. But businesses to business, and supporting things, as I said,
the stability sort of there, really. Yeah.
Absolutely, and there are businesses that are doing well and equally thriving.
So I remember reading an article where Sir Alan Sugar was saying that. Personally, I'm not, I'm not he's going to care, but I'm not a big fan of this. But I sort of remember reading an article that he'd said about he was doing some conference and people were sort of berating him about the banks not lending, but there does, as much as on the one hand you kind of, as a business owner, you want to see the banks lending to other companies around you because that translates into business that you can then start to potentially get and all the rest of it. But on the other hand, you can kind of understand why there's this degree of caution, because if a company's balance sheet, the maths behind it, as you'll see day-to-day life, if it doesn't stack up, it doesn't stack up, no matter how you rework the figures. And if you're essentially investing money, it's got to be on sound foundations.
Absolutely, and banks do have. I think their lending criteria has become more stringent due to the crisis and all of the problems that
protect their own balance sheet and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and the government has taken steps to try and shore up the banks. And there's certainly a lot of incentives for them, Project Merlin and things like that, to actually to lend out. But it is a general feeling in the business community that there is funds trapped in the banks. The government are pushing monies into the banks to try and get this stimulation of the economy.
And it's not reaching your eye,
and it doesn't reach the end user and people generally spending. So it's I thought that it's getting stopped at that level. But as you said, it's important to get the financials right, and I think that's why we are seeing, as I said before, the bank of mum and dad, friends and family, angel investors looking to take the money out of their pockets or their savings and putting them into ventures. And to be fair, recession and difficult times have spawned huge great opportunities for businesses to and investors to make money, to get in at the ground level, and it's a buyer's market.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Largely, the trouble is, a recession's fairly naff for everybody. Everyone accepts that. Nobody wants the economy to be in contraction or anything like that. But when it's there ain't a lot you can do about it. You've kind of just got to roll your sleeves up and get on with it. But there are opportunities. I myself have started a sort of web and software development business called Maya Solutions, and that was kind of born out of a bunch of conditions and opportunities that came my way, and I thought, actually, this is a good thing to do. So I think I think we are coming to the end of it now. And the trouble is, there's so much scaremongering in the media. You must read this stuff with great interest, but as I do, that one think tank, the IMF, say something, another think tank says this, and half of them are just useless.